Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're here, this is because you are doing your research on Palantir. This is actually my very first YouTube video, so thank you for making it out here. And please be open to leaving comments, giving me feedback, and letting me know if there's other things that you want to explore. I'm a CPA by training, and I also hold an MBA. So I feel like I can add a lot of value to the discussions that are taking place online regarding Palantir, the direction that they're taking, the financials, the results, what I think of it, and what sense I take from that, and how I see things playing out forward. Um, and also, trying to calm the nerves. I see a lot of people monitoring the day-to-day price action, and even the 15-minute price action, every minute price action. It's all promoted. This all happens because of social media, with Discord channels, day-to-day following your portfolio on your cell phone. But you know if you take a step back, investing is a medium to long-term game. It's not something that you should be following every 5 seconds with the refresh button on your phone. It's something that you do your homework, you gain comfort, you get excited, you believe that the company has something to offer that no one else can, and it's going to generate wealth for you down the line. And I'm tired of like seeing comments online about Palantir from mainly penny traders or dollar traders who just complain about the stock dipping 30 cents, 40 cents, 50 cents, or a dollar week over week without just taking a step back and looking at the long-term picture. And the long-term picture for me is that Palantir is going to be a company that is going to generate enormous value for their customers, and they're already doing it now, and they're actually decades ahead of their competitors with billions invested into their product offerings, which have been tried and tested in real life scenarios. Now, one thing I like to do as a Palantir holder is just keep an eye on what the institutions are doing on a regular basis. It's just to give you some attention directing information. I don't always follow what institutions are doing because institutions have invested in companies that went bankrupt, and they have invested in companies that were completely mythical and were offering zero value to the world. So the first thing I do is like I would go on a website called Fintel. It's one of my favorites. I would just go here and I would say, okay, let's see who the biggest shareholders are. And you see the usual suspects, the biggest ETFs in the world, the biggest institutional houses in the world. So Vanguard Group, BlackRock, ARK Investment, they hold a huge position in Palantir as well. If you go down, you see Sumitomo, the partner of Palantir in Japan, is also a holder. Morgan Stanley, pretty sure Morgan Stanley had a bearish position or a paper out on Palantir, but they also hold 17 million shares. And if we go quickly, the Swiss National Bank, Lord Abbott opened a new position of 6 million, and I actually believe it's about 7 million. Uh, a lot of people are opening up positions. Everything that's in green here are new positions. So the California Public Employees Retirement System Plan, they bought 3.5. Credit Suisse 2.7. So you see, there's a lot of big holders here. Even Royal Bank, when they're analysts, it's actually quite bearish on the stock itself. Now, if we arrange it by a filing date, uh, so if you look at the latest filing dates, so there's one company that has a put position on Palantir, which means they're bearish. They don't think the stock is going to do well. But you know when you look at this and you see only one, it's not so bad. Now, if you look at Lower Abbott, this is what I was talking about before. We see a 1.4 here, and a little bit over here and a little bit over there. So we saw 6 before, so they have about 7.5 million share position on Palantir. So overall, you see it's all new positions, that are being added. You don't see any fully closed positions in red. Oh, there's one here. that Blackstone fully closed their position as of the 22nd. So this is, a free resource, so it's very easy to jump onto, and you could occasionally look at this every now and then. Keep in mind the filing date. It's just a filing date and an administrative date when they put in the report, submitted the report, but it doesn't reflect like, okay, well, on the 29th, they bought X amount of shares. It's hard to decipher that information. All you have is that as of this date, they have this much shares. So one of the things that I want to do is look at what Palantir does. How do they add value? What do they do? Because I've seen articles online on, investment forums where they say, Palantir can be compared to a Google Analytics. And those type of articles make me personally want to shoot myself, because Google Analytics is a platform that is already configured to work with Google data. And Google data, if you're doing business with them, they're collecting their data based on the formats that work best for Google Analytics. But in a nutshell, that's not what Palantir does. Palantir solves problems that are created by insufficient information for management to make quick decisions. And what I mean by insufficient information, I mean that data is being hidden in multiple systems, in multiple data sources. So from a manufacturing point of view, I used to work at one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the world, and we used to have a lot of different systems to do a lot of different functions. But then when we ask someone, okay, well, how long does it take to, fabricate this part internally at that station in this city X? Uh, Usually people would say, oh yeah, well, the analyst who does that is not is either not here, or nobody knows because the data is too hard to pull out and understand, and the systems aren't talking to each other, and management is not able to make an instant decision on how to build their finished product. Should they buy externally, or should they continue fabricating these components internally? If yes, how many hours? How long does it take to order the parts and get it from one country to the other side of the country? So these are the types of problems, in very simple terms, that Palantir solves. It's not something that's readily available in Google Analytics, which says, oh, you bought this much in advertising, and you had 50 clicks on that banner that you posted. So that means, it was $50, 50 clicks, a dollar per click. Done. Doesn't work like that. That's not what Palantir does. So I think I want to dedicate my first video to just, sit back, enjoy. It's going to be a long video. So if you don't have time, then, just skip to the end. And my key takeaway is going to be, if you're a long-term investor and you feel comfortable being a long-term investor, then you shouldn't worry about day-to-day price action, and do your own homework and decide if you are comfortable holding Palantir or not. Me, myself, going through this video, I'm going to be able to show you all why I really like the stock and why I really feel that Palantir is a fantastic stock to be invested in for the long term. So let's get into it. So this is the first video that I found. It was really about Palantir and its ability to help utility companies solve their energy problems. Utility companies have different types of data, different types of components. They have to monitor the weather, they have to monitor maintenance, they have to monitor surprises, they have to monitor, the labor force, if there's any issues with them, how things are going. So there's so many different moving parts and this type of business or even service, or basic need. People getting electricity, heating for their home. I say that's a basic need. And Palantir is helping utility companies react and plan better. So let's look at this video. It's a quick video. It's a highlight of how Foundry works and how Foundry helps energy companies. So if you haven't seen this already, let's watch the video together. And if you have, then feel free to skip through. Let me make this bigger.
I'm Dr. Ben Hall. I'm an engineer at Palantir. I work with our utility partners, helping them to deploy Palantir Foundry to make operational, data-driven decisions and ultimately solving their most difficult challenges. Over the last 10 years, an evolving generation mix and changing climate have made the safe and stable operation of energy networks more challenging than ever. Palantir is partnering with major utilities across the globe to integrate and operationalize their data. We're helping them with problems throughout the value chain, from power generation to grid operations to customer care, ultimately to help enhance safety and manage risk. Network operators have a complex and fractured data landscape. They need to track the status of outages, inspections and maintenance, geographical layout, metadata on vast asset bases, as well as customer data, weather data, and more. Recent developments in intelligent grids have added...
I want to stop for a quick second. I think one of the major things that we tend to forget or we take for granted, living in a first world country, is electricity. Sometimes when there's outages or when there's issues, companies have to decide, okay, where do we need to go first? Where do we need to resolve first? How do we react? What kind of customers do we have here? If there's like a old folks home or a hospital or, critical services like, a police station that are being impacted by a utility outage problem, then, these businesses need to know how to react and what's the quickest decision that they can make to get things back up. So that's something that we don't think about because we're always used to having electricity. But with global warming, with a lot of issues, a lot of forest fires that are destroying cable lines, with a lot of weather storms that are causing issues with cable lines, these are all decisions that utility companies do have to make on a whim. You don't just wing it and say, all right, let's go here or let's go there. It has to be data-based, data-driven decisions. So let's continue and see the
vast volumes of streaming sensor data and video imagery. While this wealth of data has the potential to power data-driven, risk-optimized operations, without the right digital infrastructure, it can simply represent an avalanche of unused data. With Palantir Foundry, network operators can build the digital grid, integrating their complex data landscapes into a set of intuitive objects that represent their operations, such as outages, substations, inspections, and customers. This ontology, or semantic layer, becomes the fabric which brings together high-scale sensor data and asset metadata previously spread across a multitude of disparate source systems. The objects become the backbone for rapidly deploying decision-making applications in areas like asset health, emergency response, and supply chain management. As an example, we partnered with data scientists at a major electricity network.
Yeah, I just want to pause right here. As an example, everybody keeps asking, what does Palantir do? I don't know what Palantir does. Well, look, here's going to be a good example. So enjoy it, my friends. Let's learn together. Let's see what Palantir does. For example,
who used Foundry to develop a predictive maintenance model. The model uses smart meter and recloser data to identify patterns that signal potential asset failures. As an analyst from the asset health team, I now receive email alerts triggered by this model. This allows me to investigate the details in an interactive map where I can load all the relevant information needed to decide if and where I should send a work crew. The alert takes me to an interactive map where I can load the relevant transformers, cables, and customers that would be affected. I can drill down all the way to the individual smart meters that triggered the alert. Finally, I can decide if it's necessary to send a patrol. This is possible because these are not just icons on a map, but a digital twin of the network, individual objects representing physical assets with known relationships. Alerts can be designed around any type of input data. As an example, weather cameras combined with AI can identify early signs of fire. An emergency planning team at a major network operator relies on Foundry to provide a common operating picture of its assets. This is a high-level overview of the highest risk areas and the current status of different work programs. The source data which powers this application is split across siloed systems. You might have one system keeping track of system hardening work, one or more systems focused on land management, another system keeping track of inspections and planned maintenance, and finally risk models developed by a separate team in yet another separate environment. The common operating picture harmonizes data from these many source systems in order to power better decisions. Foundry's data lineage application automatically allows data engineers and end users alike to explore the relationships between these datasets and ultimately understand the provenance and data health. To focus attention on areas that need action, I can filter to transmission lines with high risk scores, but for which there is no current work planned. I can use this to plan new work. Now that I've identified an asset, in this case a transmission line, that could benefit from an intervention, I can quickly access a rich 360 view. This view, which is completely customizable, combines all of the relevant data describing this transmission line asset. This includes the line type and the voltage load, geospatial details, overall risk score, timeline of past inspections and associated images, and the status of planned work. It also seamlessly integrates streaming sensor data. Links to other assets on the grid, like substations, connecting nodes, or risk pixels, are also available for me to explore easily. From there, I can directly plan new work at a detailed pixel level, creating a new work order with specific pixels and comments, selecting a vendor and any materials. Finally, sending that work order to downstream operational systems to be actioned. These workflows represent just a few examples of how major network operates and work at a detailed to explore or risk sets on the grid, like
let's rewind
links to
for a
it
second,
also
okay?
past inspections and associated timeline load.
We need to take a step back and realize what we just saw. We just saw multiple streams of functions, that would typically be multiple teams in a company working in their own little silo, all combined on one screen, letting the user decide what do we need to do, when do we need to do it, who do we need to do it with, which supplier needs to come down, and how soon does this need to be done. Like the overall health is giving you the holistic picture of a transmission line with all aspects. So logistics, maintenance, operations, all of these things are being encompassed on one screen for someone to quickly assess. Before, these type of things would have to be done with, weekly reviews, weekly scrums or weekly powwows where teams would sit together and go over areas and say, oh, this seems like we're having a problem here. Okay, logistics guy, can you get someone there for this week? Or it would just be problem driven, like, oh, this place is down, we need to react. I'm not saying that this is how utility companies are in 2021, but based on what I've seen in my career, a lot of companies tend to be reactive than proactive. And this tool is really allowing companies to be proactive before something goes wrong, rather than just being simply reactive. So I'm going to rewind this because I really, really think it's important to see how much value Foundry creates.
Geospatial details, overall describing this transmission line asset. This includes the line type and the voltage load, geospatial details, overall risk score, timeline of past inspections and associated images, and the status of planned work. It also seamlessly integrates streaming sensor data. Links to other assets on the grid, like substations, connecting nodes, or risk pixels are also available for me to explore easily. From there, I can directly plan new work at a detailed pixel level, creating a new work order with specific pixels and comments, selecting a vendor and any materials. Finally, sending that work order to downstream operational systems to be actioned. These workflows represent just a few examples of how major network operators with vast, complicated asset bases are using Palantir Foundry to build their digital twin. These workflows are highly operational. They help solve critical issues in real time. And crucially, they contribute rich information back to the digital twin, improving it over time. These workflows can be deployed in weeks rather than months or years, and this means you start realizing operational value from day one.
This is funny because I've been on system implementations at companies, and it's ridiculous how much money is invested to put an ERP that's supposed to be all encompassing. I worked on a project where I think the cost was close to $200 million before the annual licenses. And we had big consultants helping with the implementation around the clock with hourly charge rates of like 750, 500, 250 an hour, working 40 hours a week for 12 to 24 months on different sections of the company to give this encompassing picture. This is for retail operation, something that's super simple. And it just blows my mind that Foundry and the Palantir team can come inside a company and be able to put all of these data sets, these different informations, all together in a matter of weeks to allow the company who's using these services to hit the ground running, as opposed to waiting for a major ERP product to be implemented over 12 or 24 months. It's insane. Let's see if the video's almost done.
We empower our customers.
Now, some other things that I want to look at is, there was a great video that was put out recently about Palantir's AI offering. They kept using the word, AI at the edge in one of the conference calls. And, if you, I actually didn't even understand what they were talking about. Every time they kept saying AI at the edge, the Palantir conference calls tend to use a lot of buzzwords that if you're not in their culture, you won't really understand. Another word being alpha. If it's kind of like what you think it is, to be better, faster, stronger. That's how they commonly refer to alpha, generating alpha over the others. So let's look at this video that was recently put out. I think it's a great video, and it really highlights what does enabling AI at the edge mean. AI at the edge, not AI in your computer, in a major workstation, not AI in the cloud. It's really AI at the edge, and the edge really means where the action is happening. AI is happening at the actual spot. So if it's a camera or if it's a car, that the AI is in the car, in the camera, and it's making decisions intuitively to offer the company or generate value for the company. So let's watch the video and we'll understand a bit more.
Here we are in New Hampshire, in the center of the universe, in my barn, where so many things have happened.
The comment always gets me. When he says so many things have happened, I really wonder what is really happening at Palantir. I feel like at the Palantir barn or Alex Karp's barn, I feel like it's one of those barns that look like a typical barn, but there's like an underground city under the barn, which is where all the magic happens.
And we're talking about some of the stuff you guys are working on. And you know, Palantir has had you know, many iterations where we build products and we have to standardize them because our clients rely on them, especially in the national security context. Each time we have like a cascading thing where you have this maximally creative focus, and then it has to be kind of standardized. And you guys are kind of in the beginning of the cascading, chaotic, creative process.
So I'm Rob Imig.
So, you know, let's take a step back and kind of try to understand what he's saying here. So what Alex is saying is Palantir has generated specific solutions that has worked for their clients. You know, very niche specific solutions that have been used, that have worked, and that have shown success. And now they're trying to standardize that solution to be able to deploy for other customers. So this is a great financial deployment or use of resources. They had a customer that requested a product, the customer paid for the product, Palantir developed the product, Palantir deployed the product, and it's been successful. The time that they've invested into creating that product that was sold has not been lost. It's now actually transferable because now they're taking that niche product and they're standardizing it. And the proof of concept already exists. They already had a customer who paid for the service, and it's been proven that it works. And that's what Alex Karp said earlier. You know, in the national security context, a lot of their products have been developed, tested, and tried. So now they're standardizing it for other uses, for other cases, which is great. So let's keep watching.
Software engineer lead, been at Palantir about 10 years.
AIP, what's the technical challenge we're actually solving? Why is it important?
Yeah, so the big change is shifting compute to the edge. So instead of bringing your data back into a Foundry or a Gotham and making your decisions in some ground, environment or cloud environment, we're actually like moving the logic and moving AI, but not only AI, also just like transforms, physics, math, but moving that logic out to the edge to actually run on aircraft, on boats, satellites, ground vehicles. We've deployed this.
And what are like moving transforms and logic to the edge?
I think there he was getting into too many specifics, and Alex Karp was like, hold up, let's not get into the details of how these things were being used. But everything he mentioned there seems to kind of sound like it had a military historical relationship. So what was it exactly he said?
Logic to the edge. What
We've deployed this.
and what are like moving
Satellites, ground vehicles,
aircraft,
ground vehicles.
boats,
We've deployed this.
and what are
satellites,
like moving
ground vehicles.
transforms and logic to the edge? Why is that difficult?
Yeah, so
From a technical perspective.
It's difficult from a technical perspective because you don't have all the power of Foundry or a Gotham there. So you have to figure out how to build an engine per se that can run in these very typically low power, disconnected environments where you don't have good network access. You're usually running on somewhere between 10 and 50 watts is typically.
So clearly, these products are in reference. He's pulling on his I guess his military deployment experiences for Palantir, but again, if you're living in an urban city, we definitely take like typical things like quick access to internet for granted, and having big workstations or power stations that are always accessible. These products that he's talking about, it's products that are kind of in the middle of nowhere, that are being used in the middle of nowhere at the edge. So, you know, let's think about like a vehicle that's being used to, or a boat that's being used to crack ice in Antarctica or something. Those boats probably do not have access to super fast internet like the cloud to be able to connect to Foundry, or to be able to connect to a Gotham, to be able to figure out a solution to an issue. But with AI at the edge, the vessel itself would be able to make its own decision. Obviously, a boat is huge, so probably could have its own server, but you know what I mean. Like, I'm talking about like something that is really uh, on its own and doesn't have the space or the capacity to make big complex decisions in a quick way. Uh, so let's see what he has to say.
Typically where we deploy, you don't have this big rack of servers, but you have a very small device that has to run all of your code. So we've been deploying to these sorts of environments and basically building this logic up and building these algorithms up in Foundry. And then once you have confidence there in that algorithm and that model and the way it's performing, then you can push it out to the edge so it can operate completely disconnected in a low.
See, they've invested in developing this product offering or these codings in Foundry for a customer, and now they are ready to take that and pivot it to another product offering called AI at the edge. It's a visionary concept. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't think about, well, can I take this software, compact it so that something that is much smaller, that doesn't have the same processing power, can still work with this product and execute great things. So let's keep watching and
latency
look at the
environment,
examples.
potentially, feeding back into the system so you could have an autonomous platform. And there's a lot of benefits to that, especially in the defense that we've seen.
And my way of explaining it to outsiders is you have two problems. One, that you have, low energy source, so batteries, and not endless supply. And two, that you have to somehow have the semantic layer reduce the complexity to the problems you can solve. Is the second problem also real, or is that just my imagination?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because the difficult thing is you basically have to build the tools that you're going to need in this edge environment, and you have to know those before you land there. So you have to know a lot about the sensors that are producing the data, what that data looks like.
You know what was, if you pay attention to the words, he was like, before you land there. And Karp said, you're running on batteries. It's very limited in supply and energy. So landing there, limited in batteries, like, it makes you wonder what exactly is Palantir working on, which sounds super exciting. Like, I'm wondering, like, oh, is it a rover in Mars? Is it something that gets sent to the moon, or something that gets sent to the middle of the desert? Obviously it's confidential because it could be like a project that they want to keep hush hush with the government, but it just seems very, very promising.
And a rough shape of what you want to do to that data so that when you get it in real time, you already have what you need. Because in Foundry, you can do data integrations. You can get data that looks like whatever, and you've never seen it before, and you have the tools to be able to work with it and to manipulate it into a format that you can make sense of. But at the edge, you kind of have to know that. You have to have it structured a little bit more where you can know what that sensor is going to be outputting.
So like maybe
have the right models.
also bastardization lay version would be, in Foundry we have unlimited supply of power, unlimited ability to integrate the data on the back end. But here we have limited data, and de facto you're pre-integrating the data you're allowed to integrate on the edge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. We just got back from Project Convergence, big Army exercise out in the deserts of Arizona, where we were installing this software on a bunch of different aircraft, unmanned systems, and manned aircraft and helicopters. And there's a big team, big
How many
development team
people are on
behind
the
this.
team?
The dev team now is probably 10 to 15 engineers, including a couple product managers.
One of the things we were talking about before that is definitely not, like, you have things that are true and believed, but you also have some things that are true and not believed. One of the things I believe is true and not generally believed is that the government isn't advancing whatever you want to call AI, but certainly whatever you want to call what we're discussing here. So my version of it is it's a little less AI, it's more managing the integration and the transforms and the logic under the conditions that we're under at the edge. Here's to Palantir's future.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, as I suspected, it's clearly being used for government purposes, AI at the edge, which this is fantastic. It just goes to show that the government keeps coming back for more unique product offerings that Palantir has. And now with those type of offerings, they're clearly on a path to standardization, and they're trying to be able to offer that to other government bodies and potentially commercial entities as well. Now, here is another video that I found. It was put out back in September 2021. It says it's Palantir for financial management, but Palantir has been used in the finance industry since I think 2010, like very early on in their journey. So let's watch this video.
From safeguarding national security to protecting public health, government organizations serve our nation's most critical missions. With limited budgets to achieve these missions, agencies must agilely align spending against urgent priorities. However, the scale of financial data is immense. Millions of transactions flow across thousands of contracts.
This is funny because if you've ever been audited by by your government or, by your province or whatever, your state, sometimes they ask you to go through your bank statements and explain every single transaction. What went in, what went out, what went, for all your bank accounts, all your credit cards. And sometimes you're moving money around from one account to another account to eventually pay a bill or to, put it into your investment accounts. And that's just one person, right? That's just you. So imagine a bank or a government body that has to track millions, if not billions of transactions to be able to detect funds that are going for a dangerous cause, or black money, or something that's illegal or illicit, like drugs, extortion, or human trafficking. Banks need proper tools to be able to quickly detect these things, and I'm pretty sure this solution that Palantir has is something that's probably been inspired by what Peter Thiel and Musk's PayPal developed. Because when PayPal was first taking off, if you read 0 to 1, one of the biggest challenges was there was a lot of fraudsters on PayPal, and every time they came up with one way to catch these guys, the fraudsters were then doing something else to get away with their fraud. So PayPal actually developed a special type of coding, a special type of solution, which involved human intervention, but also a intelligent software solution, which allowed them to continuously update and monitor high-risk transactions. or detect high-risk transactions. So let's keep watching.
Worse, data is often codified in disparate formats within a web of siloed systems, which continue to inform mission-critical work. Palantir helps unify this fractured landscape without a full system migration, creating a collaborative, access-controlled foundation for users to analyze portfolios, track budgets, and reallocate funds to power more impact. Previously, it was difficult for contracting officers to understand how much money could be removed from a contract, or even what contracts with large unpaid balances were in their portfolio. Now, with one click, officers have immediate visibility into their complete contract list, sorted by probability of excess funds with the assistance of an integrated third-party ML model. After initiating a deobligation, the recouped funds are automatically tracked in the underlying data asset, ready for reassignment. Within the first year, this workflow helped the Army successfully deobligate more than $3.3 billion in funding.
Huge.
Once established, the same data asset can power data asset. Once established,
Check this out.
once established dollars in funding. More than $3.3 billion successfully this workflow helped the Army
Within
This
the first
workflow
year.
helped the Army
Within the first year after implementation.
successfully deobligate more than $3.3 billion in funding.
The narrator doesn't mention it, but here you see that the first year that they've run this software, they were able to deobligate. So I guess reallocate or remove an obligation for these funds. They've been able to identify quickly that, okay, we don't need to spend this 3.3 billion on XYZ. We can do it for something else. Versus 2 to 2.6 billion in previous years. So they've never hit the 3 billion mark in their history of doing this, probably manually. So the fact that Palantir was able to uncover 3.3 billion when the prior range was always about, $500 million less in the best times and or $1 billion less in the worst times, it just goes to show the value that Palantir can offer in the first year of implementation. This is huge. Like, this is what Palantir does. Where everybody was asking, it's like, oh yeah, bro, it's like Google Analytics, bro. No, it's not. Like, this is what Palantir does. It uncovers opportunities for companies to take advantage of. That's what Palantir does.
Once established, the same data asset can power many adjacent workflows, such as financial auditing. As millions of transactions stream across existing systems, Palantir helps to surface discrepancies at pace, highlighting unmatched transactions, unauthorized payments, and pushing notifications to analysts for corrective action.
See, this would, all these three little things, like, narrators running through it, like it's super easy, but in real life, in practice, this would be someone who manages, project management, or like an AP clerk for a project management team that would go generate a report, see, oh, what did we pay, what didn't we pay, what's missing data, what's missing that, what's missing this. Someone would do this manually and they would have to run it one by one. But this, it's all in one platform and it's clicks away. It's clicks away. Someone's able to do this by themselves. It's so intuitive. It's incredible.
Similarly, budget analysts are often forced to rely on static financial reports, limiting their ability to effectively manage risk and adjust their budgets as priorities change.
Yeah, trust. I've worked in finance, given my background, and I've built budgets for billion-dollar revenue firms. and forecasts, budgets, pivoting from a budget based on new data and building a forecast. It's like a week, 2 week process. People invest time, it has to be reviewed, and sometimes there's errors that are made. And Palantir, this Foundry solution really allows them to work on adjusting their budgets, or creating forecasts quickly based on their priorities, which is amazing. That's why it costs so much money. It's not cheap.
Using Palantir's budget planning module, analysts can proactively identify variance and intelligently reprogram funds, while seamlessly collaborating with internal and external stakeholders. As the pace of innovation quickens,
Which means seamlessly collaborating with internal and external means, if a budget guy builds a forecast, he would have to let the accounting team know, because they're going to be following it and identifying any major variances. They're going to have to let the management team know internally. Externally, they would have to let procurement, their customers know that things are changing. All of this would be like, emails, phone calls, meetings. But when we say seamlessly, that means they're being notified right away on these changes, which saves a lot of time lost in bureaucracy.
and instability becomes more norm than exception. Agencies need immediate visibility into their finances to deploy the right solutions against changing problems. Palantir's integrated financial platform empowers analysts, officers, and leaders to ensure that every cent serves the mission.
I love that statement, that every cent serves the mission. Working in different businesses, I once had a leader of a private company once say, if everyone spends our company dollars as if it was their own, it would make a huge difference on the bottom line for the company. The fact that Palantir went even deeper and said every cent serves the mission just goes to show how focused, laser focused Palantir is to generate value for their clients. It's pretty impressive. So let's look at another quick interview series that Alex Karp did. I found this one really interesting. It was done in October 2021. It was to employees in Swiss. Just gonna go right off the bat. In this one, Alex Karp goes straight to the point, and the first thing that he says really, really impresses me, and I believe him because he does have a track record. Let's watch it and I'll show you.
We've gone from a company, we crossed the $1 billion GAAP revenue market. There is no reason this company should not be 20 times bigger.
Okay, so let's play that again for those who missed it.
We've gone from a company, we crossed the $1 billion GAAP revenue market. There is no reason this company should not be 20 times bigger.
We crossed the $1 billion GAAP revenue benchmark, and there's no reason we shouldn't be 20 times bigger. Some people are like, man, Mr. Karp is losing his mind. $1 billion is a lot of money. How can he even claim to do 20x or think it's unfathomable to hit 20x? I'm not sure if I said that right, but yeah. And let me just show you what Alex Karp has pulled off during his reign as CEO. When we look at his prospectus, when we look at the prospectus, where is it? Oh yeah, right here. This is the prospectus. So this is what Palantir submitted to the SEC before they did their direct public offering. And look at this. Or even look at this, 2 million. Yeah, it's whatever, it's 2 million. 2009, $16 million in 11 years, right? 11 years brings us to 2021. They went from 16 million to a planned $1.5 billion for financial year 2021. So that was 11 years, $1.5 billion, but they were at 16 million in 2009. So if we were to do quick maths, let's say 16 was 15, that would mean they didn't grow the company 10 times from 15 to 150. They grew it from 15 to 1,500 million or 1.5 billion, 100 times. They grew revenues 100 times, 100x in 11 years. 100x in 11 years. That kind of growth is insane. So the fact that Karp is saying there's no reason why we shouldn't be 20 times higher, it just goes to show that his vision for Palantir is much greater than what it is now. Yes, management guided for a year-over-year growth of 30% for the next 5 years, which I think they touched on over here too. Annual revenue growth of 30, 21 to 25. But I'm pretty confident that the goal is a lot higher than that.
We both overestimate and underestimate ourselves
I
in
love
private.
how he's crossing his shoulders and I cross my
The
shoulders.
version of Palantir I see is that when we were in Palantir in 2008, we had a half a product held together by people who were willing to live in a skiff. And that product now powers most of the intel services in Europe and stops terror attacks that otherwise would have turned Europe into a different kind of Europe where walking and that would be very, very far outside the norm on the right side. So we fundamentally changed the history of America and Europe by stopping terror attacks. We had a failed product, which we overcame. We built mini products that we're aware of, Guy and others, that other people don't know exist, but actually power a lot of the efforts you see in the news. We launched Foundry, which is definitely, inarguably, the most successful product in the world in what we do. By the way, in any other company, it'd be 400 products with 1,000 salespeople on each one. We regalvanized our American image, which I think was suffering under being private for too long. We became not only neutral in America, but exceedingly charismatic. We're the only company that DPO'd with people of its own leadership, people at Palantir, especially new people or people who are younger, which is many people at Palantir, assume that in a normal company, the people run the company, own the company, and are interested in the company working long term. This is mostly not the case. We were able to get into the public markets without selling our souls to the vicious, vacuous, and otherwise idiotic forces of banking, because we're not in the business.
Okay, so there was really nothing held back in that statement. What was it that he said exactly?
Idiotic forces of banking, because the vicious, vacuous, and otherwise idiotic forces of banking, because we're not.
Okay, so I'm not gonna get into too much of the details, but clearly, Palantir, they direct public offered their shares, and they didn't do an initial public offering. Excuse me. Oh wait, let me fix the volume here. Apologies. Okay, so I think it's better now. So what Palantir did was they did a direct public offering instead of an initial public offering. So what this means is that typically when there's an IPO or an initial public offering, the company is issuing more shares. It's issuing shares at a, you know, favorable discount to the banks. And then the banks will then front run those shares to other investors. So, excuse me, other investors like accredited investors, uh, other banks, other institutional holders. And then when the stock trades for the first time in the public, the bankers obviously unload their shares. They might hold on to some of the shares too. Whereas a direct public offering, the company sells the shares that the founders hold. There's no new shares being issued from the treasury. It's really the shares that the company shareholders own that's being circulated. So that's why, when the company first went DPO, the shares were on a tear because there weren't a lot of shares circulating in the market. It was just the shares that were DPO'd. And the banks, they hated that because for them it was a huge opportunity to take some money off the top. And it's possible that when there was an IPO discussion, the banks maybe told Alex Karp, "Oh, your DPO price of $10 is too high. You guys are worth much less." And that maybe angered management, maybe baffled a few. But everybody probably realized that, the banks say that, then they take your shares at, like, let's say $5 a piece, and then they sell it to other people for $10, or when it finally IPOs, it IPOs at $10. So then the banks take their profits, and the shareholders, or the company that issued the shares to the bank to raise the funds, initial public offering, ends up losing money and equity. So let's keep going.
In the business of sales, we're figuring that out. I'm sure we'll talk about more. We are doing great efforts to figure that out in Europe and in America. Within the context of our Hegelian culture, meaning that we're going to have the contradiction of real service, real product development, real implementation, and sales, not just one or the other. And the thing that I'm most proud of, and
when he says not one or the other, Karp is showing that in his head, other companies have a subpar product that can't address all of the client's needs, and as a result, they just push the product through sales channels, and they hire hundreds of employees to push these products. And this to Alex Karp is unacceptable because you're pushing a subpar product that can't be implemented properly, and you're pushing it to down customers' throats because you have a fantastic sales force. As an investor, investors might like to see that. But the thing is, these products don't last and they won't succeed in the long term. And what it would end up being is a bad experience for the customer, and then the customer might be receptive to the other great product that is not based on salespeople pushing the product, but because the product itself is attracting customers because they demoed it and then they love it and they see the benefits of it. It's two different things.
keeps me most motivated is, Palantir's culture, of course, shifts and changes, but this company is not actually run by any one individual. It's run by our culture, which still attracts among the best people and keeps among the best people in the world. Honestly, for many of us, because we're smart enough and wise enough to know the alternatives suck. But so it's not maybe that we're as good as we want to be, but the alternatives luckily really suck. And enough people have left Palantir so that one of the frustrations of building the company is people who'd gone to Stanford, my alma mater, and obviously somewhat overrated school for those of us who went to Stanford, but had only been at Heaven Stanford and Heaven Palantir, and then left for what they thought were greener grasses, often sometimes, but found out that they were not quite as green. But in any case, this culture that we have is something we have to fight for. I believe the way we took the company public in DPO was very protective of that, but obviously there are lots of things to figure out and do better. In a normal company, people have normal roles, and that's part of the reason why it is hard for people who join here who've had lots of other experience to join here. The higher you go at Palantir, and the lower you go at Palantir, I hope, the less defined your role is. And my role, in the way I conceive it, is to help insert qualitative variables that will be relevant, are relevant now, or will be relevant in the future before they can be codified in an algorithm across the company. So a business does not win where you are just.
So what Alex Karp is saying is that he's not a master coder or an expert coder. What he does is literally think about what are the world's problems and how can they be solved and what they can do before it becomes a crisis. And this is kind of, we've seen this already, right? For a few years, a lot of top CEOs like Bill Gates, they were echoing that the biggest threat to humanity would be a pandemic. And when a pandemic did arise with COVID-19 in the US, Palantir was there to support the NHS, to support the deployment of the vaccine program, and to ensure that most Americans who needed a vaccine or wanted a vaccine had one, and that it wasn't being wasted. I know in the North, we wasted a lot of vaccines. Vaccines were being thrown out, and it was because we didn't have an integrated system. We didn't have a system that worked, and there was a lot of waste. But in the US, it seems like it worked, and even people from Canada were going to the US because the US had enough vaccines for its own citizens and even Canadians.
Working on things you understand. You have to work on a lot of things that are not understandable. Like, very simply, like, why was PG better than Metropolis? Because we made a bet that the world would move towards a world where data protection and civil liberties were important. Why did our DPO work? Because we made a bet that this was the right timing. Why? And there's lots of micro decisions across the company. Why do we use this kind of advertising and not that kind of advertising? Why does this kind of person need to get more space to work, or another person needs to be moved around? Why is it that we bet we go long in this jurisdiction and short in another jurisdiction? How do we overcome the resistance of sometimes well-meaning actors, institutions, and sometimes, quite frankly, the malicious forces of laziness as embodied by the IT departments? How do we get the structure to reflect its...
I love that he said that, because that's been... I'm not going to say all IT departments are like that. I have a few friends who are in the IT world, and they're hardcore hustlers, and they get things done. But then there's the other type of IT guys that I've been seeing my whole life, who dip, work at 4, couldn't care less. I'm in IT. I know I'm the best. I know I'm in demand. So, congrats, you played yourself. It's 4 o'clock, I'm out. And, the finance team would always be at work till like 8, 9. Maybe because we're a bunch of nerds, but I get what he's saying by, quote unquote laziness.
Culture. And these things end up being a rolling, cascading, chaotic thing that invariably I work on basically all day. So I think when, people work with me, they expect, I don't know why, some kind of very normal meeting structure where we're going to sit down and go from one point to the next, to the next, to the next. I'm not denying that can work, and many of you work in that structured way, and it's clearly productive. But that's not actually how you get what I can help the company with into the company, and not so much at Palantir, but definitely when I see too much of that at other companies, I really wonder, what are they hiding with these long meetings, as opposed to getting to the unvarnished truth? So that's what you have to do to be disruptive. And we should never forget, we are maximalist outsiders. Nobody is ever going to buy our product. No one's going to buy our shares. No one's going to actually show up and stick up for us unless we are unique, differentiated, and the best. And to get that best to work, you've got to get things that don't fit to fit together, like sales and engineering, like two engineers that have very different views. Like even just building a product, you're going to need someone who can conceive of the product. You're going to need someone who can conceive the front end of the product. You need someone who can put the product. Then you need someone who can actually make the product ship. They all dislike each other, as you know from building these things. Or not to the point of dislike, hate, but it's like it's very hard. See, the more technical the people are, the more but that's the reason why we're standing here. That's the reason we get away with being unique, because we've actually done this. And every normal company does this a half a time and acquires 20 companies. We've done it at least 5 times, and like the iceberg of our product development is not even exposed to the world. They don't even believe we're going to do it. Normal software companies produce once. So normal investors look at Palantir and they see something, okay, that, they don't even believe we're going to, and like the iceberg of our product development is not even exposed to the world. They don't even believe we're going to do it.
So if you picked up on that, he says the iceberg of our product development. The iceberg, which means, iceberg, those things that are like big ices in the water. It's like the tip of our product development is not even known to the world. And they already have great products right now. And we already know about Palantir, AI on the edge. But the tip, people don't even know the tip. You hear me? The tip. So there's so much going on in Palantir that I guess cannot be disclosed for competitive reasons, but we have to either believe in the vision of the company and its leaders, and to be able to see that they've executed well and they will continue to do it again. But we haven't even seen the tip.
Normal software companies produce once. So normal investors look at Palantir and they see something, okay, that no one can do this 5 times. And they're going to wake up to a world that we play a very, very big role in. So if you're going
I love that he said that. Like, they're going to wake up to a world, the haters, they're going to wake up to a world where Palantir plays a very big part in. And I'm not even kidding you. Like, Palantir's in mining with Rio Tinto. Palantir's in utilities. Palantir's in aviation with the FAA and Airbus. Palantir is in energy with Kinder Morgan. The Palantir is everywhere in the most important things. I'm talking about mining, which means minerals, which means precious metals, that could essentially mean, does your truck have a chip? Are you going to be able to order a phone? Are you going to be able to buy a computer? Are you going to get electricity? Is your hospital going to get electricity so that people can get surgery, type of thing? Are you going to get energy? Are you going to get oil? These are things that the common person typically doesn't worry about, because they're always in a bubble. A lot of people live in a bubble, but it's because they're used to being comfortable. And the only reason they're comfortable and they feel safe is because companies like Palantir are working behind the scenes to make sure that things are going the way it should.
to buy like some weak product that barely works that you install, you can't then say, but what happens when the product is 50 times more complex than it is now? And the complexity that we are up against in the world is a complexity that Palantir embraces. This is why we attack and structures. This is why we go after the most talented people. This is why we built the culture to make sure we keep those people, because we're presupposing a radical increase in complexity, and everyone else is presupposing a Disney fairy tale that I don't think anyone ever even believes anymore. But since it's too dangerous to think of the world the way it is, people run and hide and service their institutions in ways that will not work. And the COVID pandemic is just the first of many like waves we're going to see. And Palantir was built for this. And it would be an exaggeration to say the world rests on our shoulders. And it's, by the way, but it is scary to think how much of the world rests on our shoulders. You know, the mission was why we started the company. And it's
I think that's like a reference to like Europe, the US. The world entirely doesn't. Because, the world includes, quote unquote, Western democracies and their adversaries. But how much Western democracies depend on Palantir is scary, and it's funny that he kind of chuckles thinking about it, but he can't get into it. These are confidential informations.
it is really crucial. But I would say that, like, watching Palantirians suffer through a deployment, for me, the most compelling is the work we've done. Example of this is the work we've done in COVID, especially in the US and Britain. Just like, it's so motivating, and it makes me want to also do a lot of shit I honestly don't want to do. That I wouldn't do otherwise. I'm always personally surprised, but it's like, then I think of some Palantirian and all the crap that you're going through. It's certainly more painful than what I'm going through. And then I think, yeah, well, if they can do that, I definitely have to show up and do this meeting that I don't want to do, or fly somewhere. But it's very, very compelling, and I know I'm very, very grateful.
So, how much have I recorded so far? I've recorded about an hour? No way. It's an hour video. This video is super long. I hope you enjoyed it. And it's allowed you to gain some comfort if you haven't already seen these videos. I hope you enjoyed watching it with me, hearing my commentary about it, and what I think about it. I think Palantir is going to be a great stock to hold for the long term, which is why I really love the stock, and I really am a big believer in it. For those of you who are doing your homework, who are doing your due deal, continue to do your due deal. Shoot me a message if you are seeing other things that you want me to touch on and explore with you. So that's it for now. Thank you. If you made it this far, you are a star. Thank you for watching my very first YouTube video, and I appreciate you. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you on the next video.